G'day YouTube, warbles on a lot here. This is the third video dealing with the cheap Chinesium chainsaw. My son paid $150 for his delivered. This one cost $129 delivered. I'm told there is a website offering them for $119 delivered, but there's a $33.22 delivery charge with the $119 saw. So yeah, this is the cheapest one I've heard of, and I'm lucky enough to have one now. It's an MTM 62SX. On its first little outing last week, I put perhaps 2/3 of a tank through it in 20 minutes of cutting, perhaps, during which really the only bad habit that I had personally noticed was that it tends to throw oil all up along here to about there. Doesn't throw any oil on the actual handle, and the oil doesn't get on your hand while you're using it. Does throw oil up there. I've almost come to the satisfied conclusion that with time and with use, a combination of bar lube and sawdust will probably gum up the slot which throws the oil, because after 20 minutes worth of cutting, it was throwing less oil than it was initially. So I'm going to say that's not really much of a problem. Here's a funny thing. Last week, I came to this conclusion that this bar lube oil illustration and this chain oil max min with a hole there, I came to the conclusion that that really doesn't do anything because there's nothing in the hole. However, it turns out that while there's nothing in this hole, underneath this little arch-shaped cutaway, there we do indeed find a screw for the driving and the adjustment thereof. And presumably that there is what this here is referring to. Somewhat misleading, but you know, my son worked it out and he told it to me. Okay, now that's sort of like a couple of minor eccentricities, but this next little feature, it's actually got the potential to be rather dangerous in Australia. Now, look, they've got a special little plaque with an engraved "Do Not Touch" symbol on the exhaust. Isn't that lovely? And funny thing, but that's the direction of the tubes from which the exhaust emanates. Right? That's where one exhaust pipe discharges. That's where the other exhaust pipe discharges. Pretty much slightly to one side of where the chain is cutting. It's an unusual feature in the chainsaw, particularly as the exhaust, it sticks out fairly flush with the whole front of the saw. And as you can see, those teeth on the log dogs, they're not very long. So if you engage those log dogs in something like Stringybark and you sink all the way into the bottom of the teeth, and your log is going to have red hot exhaust gases impinging on it in two little ellipsoids at about 1 centimetre range. as you can see there, and there. So that's more than a simple eccentricity. That's actually downright bloody dangerous. In Australia, where there's a lot of stringy bark about, probably won't make much damage to a box tree because you'll probably knock the burnable stuff off. But on a stringy bark, you sink the teeth on your log dog into that. On a big log, if you're cutting across its widest diameter and the saw bogs down and you stay in one position, try not to be too surprised if your chainsaw sets your log alight. So, how bad can it be? We will see. Okay, well that's where the hot oily gases were impinging, and as this little loglet gets thicker and wider, we're going to be sitting in that spot for longer. I'm going to try and show you how this E-start is weird. It feels as if the starter cord is not immediately directly connected to the crankshaft until you've pre-wound a tension spring, and then it kicks in. You don't have to exert any great force or pull at any great distance. It's weird. Show it to you again. But I digress. We'll go again. Okay, well, that's your big burn mark, and then there's another two there, and there's also exhaust staining on the other side of the cut. It's not something that I'm making up or imagining. And again, that's quite a serious bit of the singeing going on there. And this is quite a thin variety of stringy bark. It's not as if I've grabbed some really thick specimen where the stringiness of the bark is actually fairly deep. And also, this saw's been allowed to cool down between cuts. Oh, we're theoretically not empty. Well, what do you know? A, it had run out of fuel even though there was 75 mils still in the tank. So it actually uses half a litre per tank, and you get to keep 75 mils in the bottom of the tank that the suction siphon filter can't access. Such is life. Once again, that's an idiosyncrasy, not a fault. We have a problem. Hopefully I will return. All fixed. Let's see how we go now. Warm but not hot. As you can see today, we've got rain on the horizon, relative humidity 49%. He likes to have a good look around while breaking up his biscuit. But even in cool, humid conditions, I was able to get some pretty good burn marks appearing on thin bark on a forest mahogany or a pink stringy bark. So my feeling, if you want to go biting into actually thick stringy bark with a cheap Chinese chainsaw, is not only to be really super gentle and careful with the pull start, letting it rewind slowly, otherwise you will have troubles, but also because it's likely to light up due to those little short log dog teeth and the proximity of the hot exhaust gas to the cutting area. I think I'm going to make myself a new set of cutting teeth that are about twice as long, because as you will also have noticed, the bar is slightly too long for the motor's power. So if you lose that much of the bar by dint of having extra long dogs on, all it's going to do is double the distance between the probably 800 or 900 degree exhaust gas and having the hot exhaust reach your fully cured Stringybark bushfire fuel. Not the sort of chainsaw to lend to people, particularly during bushfire season in Australia. And also, as it were foretold within the prophecy, the amount of bar oil that it throws onto the actuating lever of the chain brake is greatly reduced as the slot gums up with chainsaw dust and used bar oil. That in there being the slot in question. So there you go, now we know it has got some eccentricities and one actually genuine, potentially lethal bad habit, which is if you're using this in a drought on a heat wave day on stringy bark, you can set yourself a really surprising little bushfire if you go out and start using this on a big stringy bark log and you have not got water right there ready to go. I mean, like 10-litre watering can beside you the whole time. Or modify those bloody log dogs. Put a new set on that are twice the distance and see how that goes. Warple's on a lot to YouTube. How bad could it be? Fucking deadly. Ciao.